by essentially a handful of people, the entire banking system. Because almost all national banks, we call ours the Federal Reserve, are part of what's called the Bank of International Settlements in the world banking system. And that was established, the essence of it was established around the same time we were establishing our country. And it has actually been what was behind everything. They were the ones that gave money to J.P. Morgan. He was a front. J.P. Morgan's father was the director of the Bank of England, which was 60% owned by the Rothschilds at the time. So they basically controlled the board of directors, which meant they controlled the lending of all money in literally every major country in the world we have ever since. And like hardly nobody knows that unless you've studied this. Because you'll hear, oh, well, there's all these different banks, though, Steve. Wells is over here, Citicorp's over here. Well, when I did my research, what I found out was Wells Fargo Bank and Citicorp and all these big, what we think of our American banks, are actually subsidiaries of holding companies that are in the Cayman Islands and the Isle of Man and other what are called offshore facilities. And they are in turn trusts of the Midland Bank, the Barclays Bank, Lloyd's Bank, the Bundesbank, and the Banque Nationale February, all owned by the Rothschilds in turn. They're all essentially privately owned. So to become a part of the Federal Reserve System, you've got to be a publicly traded bank, but the shares are controlled by a trust that's held offshores that's essentially another British or European bank. So our Federal Reserve is actually primarily owned by European banks, and very few people know that. And the Federal Reserve controls everything. You can't do anything in Congress or Parliament anywhere in the world without money. And they have the right to say no to the Congress. Congress can propose a bill and need funding for it, and they can say, no, I don't think so. So a lot of people don't realize it's the tail wagging the dog in the world, and they're behind the politics of what's going on with all the wars around the world. There was an agreement made by, are you stretching or do you want to answer?
Stretching.
Let me finish this point and I'll come to you then.
No, I'm stretching.
What's that?
I'm stretching.
Oh, okay. Henry Kissinger created a deal when we needed oil in the Middle East. He created an agreement, well, we'll buy your oil, but you got to buy it from us, and I'll keep you in power. Our army will keep you. That's why you see dictators in countries where there's oil. Anybody that tries to nationalize or make their oil public usually gets killed or toppled, like the Shah of Iran, for example. There was a case where Mossadegh was elected by the people in Iran some time back, and he wanted to nationalize the oil company, meaning take the revenues from the oil that was being pumped out of Iran, which is one of the largest producers of oil in the world, and actually use some of it for the government and for the public sake, for public works projects and things. But at that time, the people that owned it were the British. It's the Anglo-American cartel in general. Didn't go for that. So the CIA toppled him and put the Shah in instead. And this is what's happening all over the world. There's a small group of very, very wealthy people that are dictating the politics. They control all the news media. When I was an investment banker, one of the companies I was helping was called Jam Records. You ever heard of Jam Records? It's kind of a cool company because one of the owners was Bob Johnson, and he wrote music for Elvis Presley. He wrote Viva Las Vegas, and then he became a music producer, and he produced Johnny Carson. Not Johnny Carson. Produced Johnny Cash, and he made Dylan, Loggins and Messina, Seals and Croft, Louis Armstrong. So he was a really well-known guy in the music industry. And the other one was Paul Marshall, who was the attorney for the Beatles and Madonna, and that's how we got all them to do our discs. We were doing AIDS for Africa and AIDS for China, different discs where we would go to different musicians and ask if they'd donate a song to raise money. It was basically the gist of it. But the third partner had been the former key executive for Clear Channel. You ever heard of Clear Channel? iHeartRadio and all that? Yeah, you know that, don't you? Well, they bought up about 90% of all the airspace, all the stations you listen to some years back. change the way people think in the United States and in the West. And the first thing they did, they eliminated all what they considered inappropriate programming, meaning liberal, anybody telling you what's really going on. And no war songs were allowed. Have you noticed throughout the entire Iraq and Iran wars, there's not a single war song? Can you think of one that any recording artist? Go to Vietnam, think about the songs. Biggest, most horrific war we've ever been in, not a single war song. That's because there was censorship, and nobody even knows. Because all those stations are controlled by one corporation. You know who owns it? Bain Capital. You know who is the director of Bain Capital? Mitt Romney. He controls the airways. The same people have bought Murdoch's Fox News. So I told you earlier, Rush Limbaugh receives $2 million a year. He's received over $10 million so far. They give him the talking points, what they want him to say over the air. It's the Central Intelligence Agency that staffed it. And it's so that you think we should go to war here, or you should think we should go to get Gaddafi in Libya, or now we've got to go, there's anthrax or whatever dangerous thing over in Syria. So one of the things I want to make sure you guys all know is part of your enlightenment is not getting sucked into the absolute bullshit that's being propagated through the television and the radio waves. It's absolute propaganda. And I talk about that a little bit in my book, Money and Power, but I have just finished a second book I call The Enlightenment, where I've done a whole study on how propaganda is working, explain how what's called counterintelligence is being used in the media today to manipulate your thinking in ways that you would just blow your mind. The CIA and the NSA look at every single thing you transmit through a phone line, anything digitized, anything through satellite. They've completely done away with the privacy laws. And all the zeros and ones that go through any stream, whether it's your bank account numbers or a picture of your girlfriend naked or whatever it is, all of that goes through routers that have splitters that are basically a mirror. It's light, and you can make a reflection of like a copy of it. So what happens is our government, from the very beginning, when Fluor Corporation started laying the fiber optic cables, I was partnering with Global Crossing and was doing that. So I knew the guys doing it. The CIA, we forget that DARPA funded the whole thing. DARPA is the Department of Defense. The whole internet was built by the Department of Defense, and it was built so they could get into our heads and know what we're doing. I stopped speaking so that could sink in. It's kind of ominous. But Big Brother's definitely watching. So I just want to make sure you know that. Yeah.
Big Brother ever tried to shut you down?
Yeah, I had a definite cyber attack. Even the company that houses our website is called Homestead. It's owned by Intuit. And they called me up saying, you've been hacked. And they did two things. At one time, I had over 100,000 people on my email list. What they did is they put Trojans, and they were in different files of a few thousand each. And apparently somebody went in and they put Trojans, which is some kind of a sign in the email address that alerts whoever receives the email that this is a dangerous and not wanted email, that you've ever blocked this guy. So as soon as I sent out an emailing list, nobody got my emails anymore. My list went from 100,000 to like 10,000 overnight. And several times calls and things have just been dropped. I'm sure I'm on a list because I'm doing research on the subject. I'm seeing what they're doing. And anybody that has what they consider a